Alright, this is day 3 of Trig Identities, continuing on with what we've been doing. Alright, here's your same problem solving tips we've been doing, and let's just see what these problems are going to be a little different, but the same tips apply. Okay, so don't disregard them, they're the same thing. Alright, so notice you have a subtraction sign. You have a fraction minus a fraction. Remember, when you add and subtract fractions, you must have common denominators. Okay, so we've got to find a common denominator. Now, if there's nothing you can clean up or simplify in those fractions, then you go straight to finding a common denominator. In this case, there's no pluses or minuses in there on the numerators that you have to mess with. I'll show you what I mean here in a minute. So for now, we need to decide what is the common denominator. Well, if nothing else, it's sine times the cosine of a. So it's going to be the sine of a times the cosine of a. And in order for that to happen, this first one I have to multiply by the cosine, right? So I'm going to have the cosine of a times secant of a minus this part. What do I have to multiply by? To get a sine in the denominator here, I have to multiply by another sine, right? So I'm going to have a sine squared of a, right? Because sine times sine is sine squared. And it's equal to the cotangent of a. Alright, so let's figure this out. Now, we need to do some cleanup work. Cosine times secant. Well, think about this, okay? Cosine, what is secant? Well, if you look on your card, secant is 1 over the cosine, right? So cosine times 1 over cosine is 1. So I can replace all of this with 1 minus the sine squared of a over sine of a cosine of a equals the cotangent of a. Now, look on your card again. You should begin to remember that 1 minus sine squared of a, or theta, or x, whatever, is equal to the cosine squared of a. So this is the cosine squared of a over the sine of a times the cosine of a. Now, let's figure this out. That means I have two cosines in the numerator. Cosine times cosine over sine times cosine, right? Well, what's cosine over cosine? Those cancel out, right? What's left over? Cosine of a over sine of a, which is cotangent of a. And that's what you were trying to get all along, okay? That's what I wanted all along. All right? Yes, I should have written cotangent of a right there. Been neater about it. Okay? So, rationals, you have to get common denominators, all right? So don't freak out. You can do this. Let's try another one. 1 over sine of x minus the sine of x equals cotangent of x, cosine of x. Okay, so if one part's a fraction and the other part's not, put the other part over 1 so that you can see it really is a fraction. And you've really got to get a common denominator. And it should be clear to see now, what should that common denominator be? Well, it should just be sine, right? So if the denominator is going to be the sine of x, let's see. What do I have to do in the numerator here? Well, that's good to go. It's just 1 minus. This one I have to multiply by sine, right? So sine times the bottom, sine times the top. So sine times the top is going to give me sine squared of x. And the bottom is going to be sine, so now I can combine them. Equals the cotangent of x times the cosine of x. Now, if you look on your formula card, you should know that 1 minus the sine squared of x is the cosine squared of x. It's beginning to look familiar, isn't it? All right, again, let's separate it out. Cosine of x times cosine of x over the sine of x. All right. Again, this has to equal cotangent of x, cosine of x. And then you can break this off. This section right here is cotangent, right off your chart, times the cosine of x equals the cotangent of x times the cosine of x. There's your solution. Okay, remember, all this work is required for full credit. All right, let's try this one. So Common denominator. Looks a little crazier. Okay, you got two binomials and they are not the same. So in order to have a common denominator, I need to multiply these two. 1 minus the cosine of x times 1 plus the cosine of x. All right. In order to add them, I need to multiply this first one by 1 plus the cosine of x. So that's going to give me 1 plus the cosine of x on the top, plus, because that's a plus sign, that just carries down. This one I have to multiply by 1 minus the cosine of x, right? 1 minus the cosine of x is equal to cosecant squared of x. Now let's clean this up a little bit, all right, guys? What do I have here? I got 1 plus 1 is 2. Cosine minus cosine is 0, right? Okay. On the bottom, if I FOIL or box this out, it's a difference of squares, right? So the middle terms are going to go away, and it's going to be 1 minus cosine squared x equals 2 cosecant squared of x. Now, you should know on your card, it says 1 minus cosine squared of x equals the sine squared of x. So I can replace this with the sine squared equals 2 cosecant squared of x. Now, if I separate this out, I've got 2 times 1 over the sine squared of x. That's a reciprocal function, right? Which is cosecant, because 1 over sine is cosecant of x. So what I can replace it with is 2 cosecant squared, because it was squared as sine, it's going to be squared as cosecant, and that equals the right side of the equation, and all is good. We are done. You have to get a common denominator first, combine like terms, clean things up, and then start replacing to simplify. Let's do one more. All right, look, you have a non-fraction and a fraction. So what do? Put the non-fraction over 1, and then get your common denominator. So 1 plus sine theta is my common denominator. So this one I have to multiply by 1 plus sine theta. So I have 1 plus sine theta minus, notice there's a minus sign there, cosine squared of theta equals the sine of theta. All right? Now, I'm going to rearrange this just a little bit because I know that there's an identity on my chart that says 1 minus the cosine squared of theta equals the sine squared of theta. So if I can get the 1 minus the cosine together, I can replace. So I'm going to move the sine over and then put plus 1 minus the cosine squared of theta. All of that over 1 plus the sine of theta equals the sine of theta. Now, I can replace this with sine squared. Right? Now, I'm still trying to get sine by itself, right? And notice that on the right side of the equation there's no fraction, so I need to try to get rid of this denominator somehow. Well, look at the two terms in the top. They both have a sign in common, right? So if I take a factor of sine out, I have 1 plus the sine of theta over 1 plus the sine of theta. Look at that. Look what's going to happen. The 1 plus sine thetas are connected. Okay, so I can cancel both full things. 1 plus sine theta cancels 1 plus sine theta. And what's left is just the sine of theta. And that is what the right side said. So that's where I stop. All right. Again, it started with a fraction, getting common denominators, and starting to replace using your trig chart. Okay? Don't stop. Don't give up. Keep going.